Deep in the forested hills of Vermont lies the crumbling remains of Blackwood Asylum, a place whispered about in hushed tones by locals. The asylum was once a sanctuary for the mentally ill in the late 19th century, but it closed abruptly in the 1960s after a series of gruesome, unexplainable deaths. Stories of disappearances, strange lights, and screams echoing through the empty halls have kept people away ever since. But for Lavra Bennett, an investigative journalist with a reputation for chasing danger, Blackwood was the perfect story. She'd spent months researching the asylum, uncovering tales of unethical experiments and rumors of a mysterious patient known only as Patient 113. Determined to expose the truth, Lavra decided to spend a night inside the asylum alone. She packed her camera, flashlight, and a voice recorder, ready to document every moment. What she didn't know was that Blackwood Asylum was not abandoned, it was waiting. The asylum awakens. Lavra arrived just before sunset, parking her car at the end of an overgrown gravel road. The asylum loomed ahead, its Gothic spires silhouetted against the darkening sky. The windows were shattered, and ivy crawled up the cracked stone walls. The air smelled damp and metallic, as though the building itself were bleeding. Pushing open the heavy iron gates, she felt a chill creep up her spine. A rusted sign hung loosely from one hinge, its faded letters reading, Blackwood Institute for the Mentally Ill. Inside, the air was stale and suffocating. The long, empty hallways were lined with peeling paint and rusted wheelchairs. The faint scent of mildew mixed with something sharp or something rotting. Lavra turned on her flashlight and began to explore. She filmed everything, narrating into her recorder. This is Lavra Bennett. It's 7:32 p.m. and I'm inside Blackwood Asylum. The stories about this place don't do it justice. It's oppressive. As she moved deeper into the asylum, she noticed something unsettling. The graffiti that covered the walls seemed less like the work of bored teenagers and more like desperate warnings. Don't look. He's here. 113 never left. Her flashlight flickered. The first encounter. Lavra entered what appeared to be the patient intake area. Old files were scattered across the floor, their pages yellowed and brittle. As she sifted through them, she found one labeled Patient 130. The file was incomplete, but what she could read sent shivers through her. Name, unknown. Admitted, October 12, 1897. Notes, severe paranoia, violent tendencies. Claims to hear the building, unresponsive to treatment. A loud bang echoed down the hallway. Lavra froze, her heart racing. It's just the wind, she whispered, trying to calm herself. But as she turned to investigate, she saw a shadow dart across the far end of the hallway. Hello, she called, her voice trembling. No response. Suddenly, her camera picked up something she couldn't see with her own eyes, a faint, humanoid shape lingering at the edge of the hallway. It stood still for a moment, then disappeared into the darkness. The descent. Determined to uncover the truth, Lavra pressed on, following the faint sound of whispers. The air grew colder with every step, and the walls seemed to close in around her. She found herself in the lower levels of the asylum, where the most dangerous patients were kept. The basement smelled of decay. Rusted chains hung from the walls, and scratch marks covered the doors of padded cells. Her flashlight beam landed on an iron door at the end of the hallway. Carved into the door were the numbers 113. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. They weren't coming from behind the door, they were all around her. Lavra hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but her curiosity won. She pulled the door open, revealing a pitch-black room. Inside was a single chair, bolted to the floor. Thick leather straps hung from its arms and legs, and the walls were covered in strange symbols drawn in what looked like dried blood. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. The haunting truth. Laura's flashlight died, plunging her into darkness. Panic set in as she fumbled to turn it back on. When the light finally flickered to life, she saw him. In the corner of the room stood a man, or what used to be a man. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes sunken and lifeless. He wore a tattered straitjacket, and his mouth twisted into a horrifying grin. "Why did you come here?" he whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally. Lara stumbled backward, tripping over the chair. The man didn't move, but the room itself seemed to come alive. The walls pulsed as if they were breathing, and the symbols glowed faintly. She grabbed her camera and tried to film, but the lens only captured static. The man stepped closer, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. "You can't leave," he hissed. "You're part of it now." The escape. Lara bolted for the door, her adrenaline overriding her fear. She sprinted down the hallway, but the asylum seemed to twist and shift around her. Hallways stretched endlessly. Doors appeared where there were none before, and the whispers followed her. Behind her, she could hear the man laughing a low, guttural sound that echoed through the halls. She finally found the stairs and scrambled up them, her legs burning with effort. As she reached the main floor, she heard a deafening scream. It wasn't human. The front doors were in sight. She threw them open and ran into the cold night air, collapsing onto the grass outside. The asylum loomed behind her, silent and dark. But as she looked back, she saw something in the window of the second floor, a pale face staring down at her. The aftermath. Lara returned home, shaken but alive. She uploaded her footage, desperate to see if she had captured any evidence. But all the files were corrupted except one. The video showed her standing in the basement, staring at the camera. Behind her, the shadowy figure of patient 113 loomed, grinning. The final frame was a message scratched into the wall. "You brought it back with you." That night, Lara heard whispers in her apartment, and the next morning, she was gone. On the outskirts of Dorset, England, hidden behind a thicket of overgrown trees, stood Ravenwood Manor, once a grand estate belonging to the aristocratic Ashcroft family. It had been abandoned for nearly a century after a series of unexplained tragedies. The locals avoided the place, calling it cursed. But for Mark Wallace, a struggling paranormal investigator with a failing YouTube channel, Ravenwood was the perfect opportunity. If he could capture something real, his channel might finally take off. So, armed with his camera, a flashlight, and a backpack full of ghost hunting equipment, Mark set off to spend the night in the infamous manor. A grand entrance. Mark arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The manor was even more imposing than he'd imagined. Its stone facade cracked and weathered, its windows dark and unwelcoming. A massive oak door stood at the entrance, slightly ajar, as if inviting him in. The air was unnaturally still, and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He brushed it off as nerves, turned on his camera, and began narrating. "Alright, here we are at Ravenwood Manor. This place is said to be one of the most haunted locations in all of England. Let's see if it lives up to its reputation." As he stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The grand foyer stretched before him, with a sweeping staircase leading to the upper floors. Dust-covered furniture and broken chandeliers hinted at the manor's former glory. Mark set up his equipment, placing motion sensors and infrared cameras around the main hall. But as he moved deeper into the house, he noticed something unsettling. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were alive. The first sign. Exploring the library, Mark discovered an old journal lying on the desk. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were brittle, but the writing was legible. It belonged to Henry Ashcroft, the last owner of the manor. The entries started normal, detailing life at the estate, but as Mark flipped through, The tone changed. The shadows, they move when I am not looking. Something is in the house. It whispers to me at night. My wife is gone. The servants say she left, but I know the truth. The house took her. The final entry sent chills down Mark's spine. I've locked the doors, but it doesn't matter. It's in the walls. It's in me. A sudden thud echoed from upstairs, breaking the silence. Mark jumped, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Probably just an animal, he muttered, trying to convince himself. The shadow in the hallway. Mark climbed the grand staircase, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The upper hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors. The air was colder here, and his breath fogged in front of him. As he approached the first door, he heard faint whispering. It was indistinct, like a dozen voices speaking at once. He pushed the door open, revealing a bedroom frozen in time. The bed was still made, and a vanity mirror stood in the corner, its surface cracked. As Mark stepped inside, the whispering stopped. Turning to leave, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. In the cracked mirror, a dark figure stood behind him, a tall, featureless shadow with elongated limbs. Mark spun around, but the room was empty. His camera suddenly began to glitch, static filling the screen. The descent. Rattled, Mark decided to check the basement, where the Ashcroft family reportedly held seances. The door to the basement was locked, but as he touched the handle, it creaked open on its own. The staircase spiraled downward into pitch darkness. The smell of damp earth and decay grew stronger with each step. At the bottom, Mark found a large stone chamber lit by a faint, flickering glow. Candles lined the walls, though they shouldn't have been burning after all these years. In the center of the room was a circle of symbols etched into the floor, surrounded by old, blackened bones. Mark's flashlight flickered again, and the whispering returned louder this time. He turned to leave, but the basement door slammed shut above him. Panic set in as the temperature plummeted. The shadows along the walls began to shift, crawling toward him like living creatures. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber. A deep, guttural voice answered, "You shouldn't have come." The final encounter. The shadows converged, forming a towering figure in the center of the room. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its presence was suffocating. Mark backed away, but the figure raised an arm, and an invisible force threw him against the wall. Pinned and unable to move, Mark watched in horror as the shadows began to seep into his skin, crawling up his arms and neck. The voice spoke again, this time inside his head. "You belong to the house now." Summoning all his strength, Mark broke free and ran up the stairs. The shadows chased him, their claw-like shapes scratching at his legs and back. He burst through the front door and into the night, collapsing on the ground outside. When he looked back, the manor was silent and dark, as if nothing had happened. The aftermath. Mark returned home, vowing to never speak of what happened. But strange things began to occur. His reflection in mirrors no longer matched his movements. Shadows in his apartment stretched and twisted in impossible ways. And at night, he could hear the whispers again. 1 week later, Mark's YouTube channel uploaded a video. It was a single, unedited shot of Ravenwood Manor at night. In the final frame, a shadowy figure appeared in the window, staring directly at the camera. Mark was never seen again.
Warning: every story hides a chilling twist that will leave you questioning reality. Whether fact or fiction, secrets unravel, mysteries deepen, and nothing is as it seems. Stay until the very last second to uncover the truth.